Hey, what's happening, everybody? This is the Brain Drain Podcast, and I'm your host, Connor McCann. So around a month ago, I released another video about the graffiti scene in San Francisco during the 1990s. And I got a pretty good response for it. Thank you to everybody that checked it out, left a comment, liked it, all that good stuff. I appreciate it a lot. And just some folks have asked me during that time to speak on the scene further. So here we are speaking on the scene further. And really this video here is just kind of an add-on to that last video. And in the last kind of portion of that video, I talked about bus drivers and the dangers that they presented. And I just wanted to go into bus drivers in the city during the 90s just a little bit further. So before talking about bus drivers during that time, I just kind of want to just give a little bit more context towards bus drivers in the city during the 1990s and times before. So similar to people that worked for the police department, people that worked for the fire department, plumbers, auto mechanics, bus drivers came from largely working class communities within the city. And in the 90s and times before, there were a lot more working class communities, a lot more working class people in San Francisco before successive waves of gentrification kind of made the city unlivable for a lot of people. I can also add folks that work for DPW like my mom did kind of belong to this similar working class culture that was very prevalent in the city during this time. And it's folks that could earn a good wage doing things like police work, being a fireman, being a plumber, working for DPW, and bus driving. You could earn a good wage, you could raise a family, you could live in a half decent neighborhood, if not outright decent neighborhood, and you didn't have to go to college. You belong to a union, you would be guaranteed certain rights, certain pay raises. And almost like the culture of the city was preserved because people had access to jobs like this. And the city was still kind of just livable. If you had a working class job and you were paid one of these working class wages, you could still live in the city and you could still remain part of your community. You didn't have to live in Daly City, you didn't have to live in Vallejo, you didn't have to live in Antioch. You could stay in the city, you could stay connected to your people there through jobs like bus driving. And San Francisco is a place with this working class culture in mind that produces just a lot of characters. And a lot of us that grew up in these working class neighborhoods, myself included, there was a certain just almost personality aspect to us. And a quirkiness, if you want to call it that, just something that differentiated each other from each other. Each individual person was almost like a character in their own movie. And we all kind of combined together to make a collective culture. But the bus drivers, the police officers, the firemen, the plumbers, the street sweepers were no different in this regard. A lot of folks from that time were really good with this, telling stories, cracking jokes on each other, making fun of each other, recalling things from 50, 60 years ago off the top of their head. These kinds of ways of communication, these kinds of ways of interaction were prized by a lot of people, myself included, my family included. And the bus drivers were no different than that. A lot of people had nicknames. A lot of people just had funny ways of talking. They had their own slang that they created. They had their own personal style, and they were an island unto themselves amidst everybody else in these neighborhoods in the city of San Francisco. And in riding the buses, you could encounter just these characters, guys that were very particular, sometimes women that were very particular, that a lot of times came from outside of San Francisco, a lot of times even outside the country. Figured during the 70s and 80s, it's a time of great upheaval throughout the world, especially in Central America. In the Philippines, it was like that. Vietnam had just experienced that in the 70s. Southeast Asia experienced it in the 70s. And those kinds of dynamics were reflected in the city. A lot of the people that maybe had come over themselves or maybe some of their children ended up becoming bus drivers because, as I said, you could make a livable wage and you could just stay in the city, you could stay connected to your community, stay connected to your family. And we would see bus drivers of all races, nationalities, ethnic groups, religious groups, all throughout the city of San Francisco. And like I said, a lot of these guys were characters, and it's not even in the 90s. I remember a bus driver in the 2000s, and I was in my mid-20s at this time. I was getting on the 24 to Visadero. It stopped right in front of my house on Cortlandt Avenue, and it would take me out to the Richmond where I worked. And I remember getting on the bus one day, and it was a Sikh guy, and the first thing I noticed about him was his muni outfit and his turban matched. Like, he had the colors matched, kind of that light brown / khaki color. That was his shirt. He had his brown jacket, and his turban was the same color. And I was like, hey, that's fly. Like, my boy lined up his outfit, and he was cool. He had a smile for everybody. He was greeting everybody. When we hit 18th and Castro, all of a sudden, we just see a car on fire just on the street. And this dude wasn't tripping. I can't say the same necessarily for the rest of us. Some of us were like, holy shit, It looks like there's a car on fire. What are we doing? And this guy was just kind of standing. He stood up. He had his hand on his hip. He was very confident. And he said, "Don't worry. The gasoline isn't on fire. We're safe." And everybody else isn't even thinking about gasoline or different combustible elements in a vehicle. But this dude, through his life, I would have to assume, knew the difference between just a regular burning car and a car that was on fire with the gasoline on fire. There was a smell that was missing that he seemed to be very familiar with. And I'm not necessarily sure if he was from the Punjab in India. He was Sikh, so there's a good chance that he was. That is the predominant religion in the Punjab. If he came up in the 80s, especially during the leadership of Indira Gandhi, he probably knew exactly what a burning car and a burning car with burning gasoline smelled like. And this dude stayed calm. They put the car out. He just went about his business. It was nothing to him. A lot of guys like this were bus drivers. And back in the 90s when I was a graffiti writer, the Times just had a more up close and personal kind of just way of being. And you would see the same bus drivers every day. You get to know some of their names. Some of those guys you would have known because they lived on your street. People knew their neighbors then. San Francisco is a city now of almost 900,000 people. And just the way that the culture of the city is now, people have no idea who the hell is living right next to them. And there were people that I would know as a kid in the 90s, 5, 6, 7, 8 blocks away, see this guy. This guy might be in his 30s. We'd see him all the time, say what's up to him. It was more like that at that time. And it wasn't all that much of a big deal for adults and children, kids to have interactions with each other, talk to each other, joke with each other, make fun of somebody's shoes, make fun of somebody's jacket. Those kinds of interactions were pretty common. And antagonistic interactions and antagonistic relationships between taggers and bus drivers were very common as well. So throughout the city as a tagger in the 90s, you could kind of expect different things and different levels of treatment from the bus drivers that you would encounter, depending on where you were at in the city and what lines they drove. So where I grew up in Bernal Heights on Cortlandt Avenue, there were a couple of major buses that went all throughout the city that passed through my neighborhood or just maybe a block or two away on foot. You had a smaller bus like the 67 that was just pretty much just a Bernal Heights bus. It would take you up to Bernal Heights Park. It would take you down to 24th and Mission. It would kind of just cut through the neighborhood. It wasn't that long of a ride. It was a very small bus compared to everybody else's buses, especially in comparison to buses like the 14 and the 38, which were damn near as big as the city block themselves. And those bus drivers, at least for like the 67, could expect a certain level of shenanigans from us getting on the bus. And some of those guys knew us personally. Some of them would see us in the neighborhood. I believe I had a friend whose mom drove the 67. So we get on her bus, there's no room for, she's gonna trip on us. In our neck of the woods, the bus drivers would be, as I talked about in my last episode about graffiti, they'd be a little bit more proactive. And some of them, like I said, would just trip on you instantly, let you know don't try anything on the bus or you're gonna get kicked off. Sometimes they would see you and they would just kind of just watch you and they would look out for you, see what you're doing, see what you're about, and they would just keep a constant presence without having to say anything to you. Some of them were terrified of us. And like I said, some of these guys are coming from places where conflict was still ongoing or it just ended prior to their arrival to the US. Some of these guys might have been dealing with trauma issues. Some of these guys might have seen a collection of kids acting aggressively, which we were. We're getting on the bus to let you know we don't care about you, we don't care about your bus, we care about tagging, and we're gonna tag the fuck out of this bus. First chance we get, a lot of us wouldn't even hide it. We would get on the bus, ring the bell, maybe as soon as we got on. So that means we're getting off at the very next stop and just tag like hell all over the bus, give you the finger, call you a dirty name, and get off the bus. And for some of you guys might be like, hey Connor, that sounds like some real do. You're not wrong, but the city had a kind of antagonistic character. We came out of these neighborhoods, as I said, that had just a little bit more hostility, even joking hostility, just upfront, just you to our beings. And that was extended to any authority figure. That was extended to teachers. That was extended to the police. That was extended to bus drivers. Whoever felt like they had authority towards us, that was our response to it. And on some of these buses, like I said, some of the guys just wanted nothing to do with us. And they just wanted us to just get the hell off the bus as soon as possible. Some of them would call the police on their radios. Some of them would be very scared and just look straight ahead. They would see us sneak on the bus. They would see us doing all kinds of stuff, start smashing windows, kicking chairs, playing music, smoking blunts, drinking, doing things like this, and they just wanted to get their job over with and get paid and go home and nothing else. And I can't say I blame them. I can also say that for some neighborhoods that we would go to, specifically, we go out to the Avenue sometimes, talk about crushing the Avs. We'll go out to the Richmond, go out to the Sunset, hit West Portal, hit some of these other places and jump on some of these smaller buses. And sometimes we could get on there and they wouldn't even know that that's our intention. That is sometimes so far outside their worldview and expectations. They're not really worried about graffiti out there. Graffiti isn't as prevalent. There's definitely a lot of riders that came out of the Sunset, that came out of the Richmond, that came out of these areas. But they might not necessarily be so on guard. And they'd be kind of shocked. A lot of those guys would trip on you as soon as you start tagging though. And as soon as you bust out something like a pilot marker, even if they see the marker, they're tripping on you. Some of them will just jump out of their seat, stand up, walk to the back of the bus and let you know, get the fuck off my bus right now. Others would just let you know straight up, I'm calling the police. And when that would happen, we would just find our easiest exit out of the bus. And many times, we've all done it, I've personally done it, that would mean jumping out of the side of the emergency exit and just kind of cracking that thing open and sliding your ass down the side of the bus and running to safety as fast as you could. You never knew where the cops were. Sometimes there would be cops just on the bus. Sometimes the cops wouldn't be that far away. There's a lot of police stations throughout the city of San Francisco, and cops are just always kind of milling around, and you got to worry about them as a tagger. So you jump out of that window, you make your escape, and you live to tag another day. And sometimes between these different bus drivers that either didn't care, and there's one that I personally don't remember, so I'm not going to really speak on him too much, but my people from San Francisco that remember this guy, I want to hear your memories. There's a guy named 30 Seconds, and apparently he gave you 30 seconds to tag on the bus. 30 seconds to do your thing. I've heard he drove the 14. Like I said, I don't remember him personally, so I'm not going to speak on him. But I want to hear your guys' stories about this guy that just used to let people tag on the bus. And some people had that reaction to taggers, maybe not to the extreme of just straight up telling you got 30 seconds to tag, like 30 Seconds would, allegedly. But, you know, there was kind of an aversion. They'd see you do it and just kind of look away. Then, as I said, there were the people that were more aggressive, proactive. Some of them would trip on you as soon as you got on the bus. Some would trip on you as soon as you started tagging. But there's one that I remember in particular that almost used to find delight in the conflict with taggers. And me and my friend, whose name is K, we'll call him K, encountered this man one day in 1998. So this guy that we're gonna call K, to protect the innocent, to protect the guilty. I'm not going to put him out there. He's going to know exactly who he is. You know, I'm glad you're still around. I'm glad you're still in the city. We've lost so many people over the years, and it makes me happy to see you're still around, man. So shout out to you. Shout out to your family. This guy, Kay, I met him when I was a freshman at Raoul Wallenberg Traditional High School over in Laurel Village / in the Richmond. It was supposed to be a good school. I only went there because my sister, shout out to her, was going there. She was a good student. So I got kind of grandfathered into there. I had no business going to any kind of college preparatory school at that time. I was a fuck up. As I've said previously on this show, I was doing a lot of dumb shit. School was not a priority. Playing basketball was something of a priority at that time. Didn't make the team that year. Kind of said basketball's not really for me. Doing stupid shit like tagging, committing criminal acts, more my style. And that's really from 9th grade on how I proceeded for the next couple years of my life. Me and this guy, Kay, both were already tagging when we met each other. And we just, you know, kind of hit it off. We have similar backgrounds. I think he's part Irish as well, Irish, Mexican, general white dude. He grew up in the neighborhood. His father, rest in peace to him, grew up in the neighborhood as well. His mom, I believe, grew up in the neighborhood. His brother was a tagger, and a well-known tagger at that. So we kind of came into our own separately and just combined to just be really stupid together. And this guy, he would do things that I would never even conceive of. Like, he would just carry around shit to throw at cars, to throw at buses at all times. And there was one time, I believe it's on Virginia and Mission, the Big Lots. I don't know if it's there anymore, but there's a senior center, a senior home that sits on top of the Big Lots parking lot. It's a huge, like almost like cave-like parking lot. And this area hangs over just the street parking that's right in front of the store. This dude, Kay, pulled out an avocado one day just out of his pocket. He was walking around with the avocado and He had aim. That dude had aim. He whipped the avocado down and it splattered all over this person's windshield. We ran out, we both were cracking up laughing. And when we came back, we saw the owner of the car just like kind of freaked out, talking to the police, like still shocked, like what the hell happened? How did I get all this green shit all over the windshield of my car? It was hilarious to us. This is the kind of stuff he would get into whether I was there or not. He was just this kind of guy, and he enjoyed the thrill of this kind of semi-harmless stupidity. I don't even know if I want to call it stupidity, because he gave it a lot of thought. He would do these kinds of things. Like he would print out porno and just like tape it to a sidewalk on the street and watch people's reactions as they would pass by. Like, he's a very interesting dude. Shout out to him. And we used to get into just idiocy at this age. And we were tagging. We were part of crews together. We were part of battles together. And this was my main guy that I would tag with during this time. So one day, we're at Geary and Divisadero, and that's a street corner that I witnessed my first violent act that I ever saw in my life. I'll talk about that at some time. But we're on that corner, and being on that corner always kind of gave me the jitters. But we were there, and we're about to get on the 24 one day. And as I'm getting on, and there's another guy that we tagged with that I'll talk about later, he gets on. The bus driver puts a hand up and says, "No, that dude's not getting on my bus." And we kind of look at the guy and we're like, "Damn, what the hell did you do?" And he goes, "Nope, you're not getting on my bus." And he was like, "All right." And we're like, "All right, dude. All right, Kay, we'll see you later, man." And as I'm talking to our other friend, I say, "Man, I wonder what," and I said his name, Kay, did to get him banned from this dude's bus. And I'm 14 years old. I don't have the most criminal savvy. I'm not thinking I shouldn't be using this guy's actual name. I should maybe be calling him by his graffiti name or something like that. But this is a friend of mine, and that's just how I know him. That's just the type of dude I am. Everybody else can call you something else. But if I know you as this, and this is what I was introduced to you as, that'll be what I use. I didn't know that that was so problematic until a couple of days later. And this bus driver, I kind of alluded to him in the last episode, talking about these like Irish guys from the sunset. And, you know, being an Irish guy myself from the city, I know my own people when I see them. And there's certain things and certain behaviors and ways of being, and even the way of wearing the sunglasses, just opposed with the mustache. And it's a mustache and a flat top. Kind of the 1970s rocker vibe of I used to go out and drink a lot of beer and race my car up and down Great Highway and just sock people for no reason. Like, he seemed like one of those types of dudes. We see the 24 passing by one day. And like I said, the 24 stops right in front of my house. I'm standing in my yard with Kay, and we see the bus come by, and we see that same bus driver stick his head out the window and go, "Hey, Kay," and just it has a big smile on his face. And like I said, Kay took a lot of delight in doing these things, and he met his match in finding a bus driver that not only was anti-tagger, was tripping on taggers, was basically banning taggers from getting on his bus, but he took delight in the personal conflict and confrontation with teenagers. And thus, we started beefing with this bus driver. Not that long afterwards, I can't get on his bus either. And he's telling everybody, "These two guys right here, they gotta get the fuck off the bus." And just, you know, we're trying to sneak on. We see it's this dude. After a while, we just don't even bother. If we see it's him driving the 24, which is the only bus I need to take to get back from Wallenberg, just say, fuck it, I'll just take the next one. And it gave opportunities to tag other buses with less aware bus drivers, but this dude was a Hawkeye, and he would see my buddy Kay everywhere and would always call out his name. He never shrank from any confrontation with Kay. It was always proactive fuck you from this guy the moment they saw each other. And to Kay's credit, it was always proactive fuck you right back to this bus driver. Always. Didn't matter what he was doing, didn't matter where he was at, what time of day. If he saw that guy, they were talking shit to each other. And this built up. This built up over days, and it built up over weeks. Until one day, Kay was on 30th and Mission, and this guy parked his bus. And Kay's thinking it's just a normal interaction between the two, but it's not. A lot of times the 24 drivers will park on 30th and Mission and just hit the Walgreens or hit Safeway. And I'll say anytime a bus driver parked his bus for any reason, it gave us ample opportunity to do whatever. And a lot of times that would mean sneaking into the bus, just bombing the bus inside, bombing the bus outside, if they left their jacket behind, those jackets were like trophies. And to taggers, I knew a guy, same guy that I was talking about in the last video from FMT that used to do the walkdowns. That dude was coming up on jackets, it seemed like all the time, or at least he just had one and he wore it pretty often, but he was kind of almost like adult sized anyway. And one can suspect that perhaps he could wear this jacket and sneak into the bus yards and tag, and people would just think it's another bus driver. And if you couldn't get a jacket or if you couldn't get a muni hat, just stealing transfers was good enough. So these guys, they would have to be on the lookout when they would just park their buses to do normal stuff like hit the bathroom, get a sandwich, bottle of water, something like that. They had to be so aware that they were leaving their bus behind. And people like us were just kind of always around the corner waiting for it to happen. And perhaps that might have induced him to do what he did next. Kay and this bus driver, this 70s rocker dude, Sunset Irish guy, I suspect, start getting into it and start talking shit to each other. And the guy gets off the bus and just starts chasing my friend down the street, starts chasing him down Mission Street. And he had to book, he really had to just turn on his jets and get going. And it was the last kind of thing that he expected. And I can say that this kind of adversarial relationship, not uncommon, and even a potential escalation to violence from bus drivers, not uncommon as well. And for the entire time that we saw this guy, that we remained active as taggers. I personally wasn't involved in tagging too much longer. By the summer of 1998, I kind of fell back from everything. And basically for the duration of having to see this guy, it was always just upfront beef, upfront just nonsense from him. Shit talk, aggressive shit talk, confident shit talk from a guy in his 40s towards a couple of 14-year-olds. So thank you guys very much for checking out this video. I just wanted to put out a little bit, something extra about just those times. And I'm going to continue to follow up and do these San Francisco Graffiti in the 90s videos. The next one's either going to be about battling or it's going to be about getting busted tagging. And I'll talk about those maybe in the next month or so, maybe at a later time. But my next video is going to be about the similarities in the deaths of two men, two musicians, Christopher Wallace, aka the Notorious B.I.G., and Valentin Elizalde, a banda singer from Mexico, from the state of Sinaloa. I'm going to talk about their deaths and the similarities because there's a lot of similarities in their deaths. I'm going to talk about that next, but thank you guys very much, and I'll be back at you guys soon.